Red Bull very kindly invited me out to the Red Bull Flick tournament in Helsinki, Finland. They paid for my flight and accommodation and granted me behind-the-scenes access to the event. Should you be planning a visit to a CSGO event in a far-off land, my advice to you would also be to delay the return home by a few days, just that it can double up as an opportunity to explore somewhere you otherwise wouldn't ever have visited. And my other bit of advice would be to bring somebody along to help you organise it. There's something bittersweet about walking somewhere knowing you're unlikely ever to visit there again, but it would be even sadder never to have tread there in the first place. Welcome to my very cheery travel diary. It turns out that Finland is colder than England, the sort of cold where you hastily put clothes on when you go outside and then frantically tear them off again when you get inside before you start sweating everywhere.
Oh my god, that's adorable. Oh.
That's where people go swimming in really cold water because they're silly.
Because it's the same as the sea, isn't it?
What, cold? Yeah.
It's the seawater. It's actually the sea.
It seems to be a country of extremes, with the Finnish having a fondness for cold water swims and steamy hot showers. But whatever they choose to do, they like to do it naked. Waking up on the first day, I walked from the hotel to the event. I got to the Red Bull Flick arena before it started and took a COVID test, as did everybody working at the event. I'd hate to get COVID, but the idea of giving it to others somehow seems even worse. It was all hosted in a place with a Finnish name that I'm not even going to try and pronounce, but here's what the name looks like, and here is what the venue looked like. I've been to big CSGO events before, majors and stuff like that, and it was interesting to compare them with this one, which with 1,000 seats was on a much smaller scale. You got closer to everybody than you would have done at a major. Players and casters walked freely about the event, and the stage is much lower down and closer to the seating, which makes it feel more personal. This was not a standard CSGO tournament. Instead of Defuse, Red Bull Flick used a custom game mode, which I've already talked about in previous videos. The game mode was 2v2 with deathmatch, boost ramps, surf platforms and disabled full damage, where the goal was to make the enemy's points drop to 0 by holding the control point and by repeatedly fragging them. The weapons used tended to be more diverse too, with SMGs and shotguns making regular appearances, and being used in unusual and highly effective ways. So it was interesting enough to see such an unusual game mode hosted in a competitive setting, but it was made even more interesting by how it pitted pro teams against amateur ones. It doesn't sound fair, does it? The pros should surely win through raw skill and aim. But in practice, the amateurs tended to have the advantage, probably thanks to the numerous qualifying rounds they had to battle through to reach the event in the first place. It quickly became apparent that there was more to this game mode than raw aim, as the pros got outmaneuvered by pub masters with masterful air strafing ability, or knifed by a sneaky lurker who knew the maps perhaps a little too well. Sky Platform was my favourite, with its many boost ramps making the spectator experience something special. And I got to meet the mappers and modders who have made the Red Bull Flick game mode and maps. There's Tophattwaffle, who has been making mapping tutorials for over a decade now. There's Max Giddens, who designed the Red Bull Flick game mode and worked with Tophattwaffle on the map Facade, which was officially featured in CSGO a while back. And the Whale Man, who has worked on maps like Chlorine and Abbey. I've known their names for years and have been speaking to them for months, but there's something you don't get until you meet them in person. They suddenly become real people and not just familiar sounding usernames online. And it was very nice to crack jokes about the Source engine and for the people around me to get them for once. These guys were a cheery bunch and I spent a lot of my time hanging about with them at the event. So it turns out the game mode and maps literally were powered by Red Bull. They received a crate of drinks while working on the maps, and at one point Max ran out and sent an emergency meme to Red Bull and received a top up. As you'd expect, there was a lot of Red Bull at this event. A lot. And they had these amazing cups which would light up in different colours depending on the type of Red Bull that was poured into it. How can such a technology exist, you might ask? Well, the answer is so simple I'm going to let you figure that out for yourself. For me, events such as these are a wonderful chance to meet people. At larger events, not meaning to brag, but sometimes I don't have enough time to talk to everybody who recognises me. But this being a smaller event, I did have the time to have good conversations with everybody who wanted to say hi to me, and I'd frequently bump into the same people over and over again. So I felt like I knew a lot of people personally by the end, compared with bigger events where that's absolutely impossible to do, though it was a shame that the seats weren't sold out. It being hosted in Finland, most people there were Finnish and lived just a few hours away. For a lot of people, it was their first CSGO event, and I hope it encourages them to go to more. I suppose that when events are hosted somewhere more central, like in Germany, then you get people from surrounding countries as well, leading to more diversity, and it would probably have helped to have filled out the event. But we live in difficult times, and with COVID still so prevalent, I understand the difficulties and unknowns with hosting an event of this scale. I believe the day after this event ended, new restrictions came in to limit social gatherings to 50 people, so Red Bull got very lucky with when this was hosted. Matches at a live event like this aren't everything though. They're the glue that holds the experience together, and the thing that you come back to time and time again, but you'd be missing out if you didn't take the opportunity to explore what else was going on. And there were numerous activities about the event, and signing sessions from pros. A highlight for me was simply seeing Tophattwaffle and the others watching everybody playing on their levels. They were deeply invested in what people thought of their maps, and they'd watch with deep concentration whenever the casters or players were talking about them. They appeared to really enjoy watching teams battling it out on their creations, and looked on in horror whenever somebody pulled off a stunt that they hadn't anticipated for. Towards the end of the event, sneaky tactics were deployed, like where one team would rush to control the capture point first, then they'd smoke it up and would ambush the enemy team as they tried to retake it. But Red Bull made a mistake. They had all the pros competing on the Saturday, but aside from Team Spirit, the rest were knocked out by amateur teams. This was disastrous for the viewing numbers, and the stats dropped right off for the Sunday, which is a shame because the matches on that day were highly entertaining, and the grand final saw Team Spirit against the home favourite Finnish team. So given the circumstances, there couldn't have been a better finale, and it went all the way through to a best of 3. Team Spirit ultimately won it, but it was a good game, and I really think everybody involved in this event will look back fondly at this bizarre custom CSGO experience. It was just a shame it wasn't easier to find out what was going on. Red Bull hadn't hosted a web page that detailed the timings and activities anywhere, so you couldn't just visit their site to see the schedule or when it was all meant to start and end on each day. So I'd definitely like them to create a one-stop hub online for next year's event, instead of requiring you to look up stuff on Faceit or Liquipedia. So that was the event. A number of people went to an Irish bar afterwards, and it wasn't long before the karaoke started, which is apparently a very Finnish thing to do, and a great way to finish the event. So what else is there to do in Finland? Good question. Helsinki itself was great for shopping, and I did walk past a roller coaster, but it seemed to be closed. The underground church was a nice peaceful experience, and we explored the Semilina Fortress Islands, which are a 15-minute ferry ride away, and which have switched hands between the Swedish, the Finnish, and the Russians multiple times. And somewhere there's an old phone booth. Oh, you just stood right in front. Oh no. This whole day is ruined.
Why don't you move then?
It's the perfect angle. My girlfriend and I visited the nearby town of Porvoo, which was very nice.
This is nice.
This is nice.
This is nice.
An hour away from Helsinki, the moment we left it started snowing and the town had a really pretty wintry vibe. The number one attraction here were some warehouses that had been painted red, but they're more picturesque than you might expect. The chocolate shop there was excellent too. Perfect blend of being very tasty and relatively cheap. I fell in love with these stalls. We weren't impressed with the Hesburger place that we visited, and things in Finland were expensive compared with what I'm used to in England. Apparently, for cheap stuff, Norwegians visit Finland, the Finnish visit Estonia, Estonians visit Latvia, and the Latvians visit Poland. Conveniently, we also went on a day trip across the sea to Estonia to visit the old town of Tallinn. The trip is cheap and takes just over 2 hours, and we figured it would be a good opportunity to finally catch up on the sleep that we didn't have during the Red Bull event. But suddenly... You don't get this on the ferry to France. Tallinn is a very interesting place. Another place that's regularly had run-ins with Russia. It's had an interesting and turbulent history and is filled with awesome looking towers and walls, and this very tall church. And this one, which it sounds like the Russians built to troll the locals. Old Town was the highlight, a town that's built on a very steep hill with lovely views in all directions. And we bought this. They were very pleased when we did, so I guess they must have been trying to get rid of it for a while. Thank goodness most people here spoke English, because being English, we don't speak anything else. When I'm in Cologne, I try to speak German, but when they immediately respond in English, I admit defeat. And then we went home. So all in all, a very nice holiday, and the first time I've been abroad since COVID began. As for Red Bull Flick, it was a very good and memorable event, and I sincerely hope that they carry on with these weird and wonderful game modes, because as much as I like Counter-Strike, it's always been the modding scene that's appealed the most to me. And I love the concept of competitive CSGO on custom maps, and letting the best players from the community pit their skills against the best that CSGO's pro scene has to offer.